I heard my own wife say that I was dead. Not in a dream, not by mistake. She stood in front of a room full of people smiling gently, her voice trembling as she talked about her late husband, Richard Hale. The only problem was, I was still alive, still breathing, still paying the damn electric bill for the house that bore both our names. If you're listening to this right now, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're hearing my story from and what time it is. There right now, I want to know. Have you ever been buried by someone's lies while you were still alive? Because this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about a man who was declared dead while his heart was still beating, and how I took back my name one breath, one truth at a time. And if you think a marriage can't still hold surprises after 30 years, well, let me tell you how a man finds out he's become a ghost in his own life. She said I was dead. Not in anger, not as a slip of the tongue. She said it like a simple fact, like she was reading it from an obituary. And that, my friend, was the moment I stopped believing I knew the woman I'd slept beside for 32 years. My name's Richard Hale. I'm 55 years old, born and raised here in Cedar Ridge, Missouri, right in the folds of the Ozarks, where folks still fix their own fences and say grace before supper. I build staircases, wood and steel, curved ones, floating ones, the kind that outlive the people who climb them. My hands are scarred, my back's half shot, but work has always been my truth. In this town, your name is worth exactly as much as your word and the quality of your weld. For 32 years I thought my marriage to Margaret Hale, Maggie, as everyone calls her, was cut from that same steel. We built a home on half an acre of my father's land, raised two good kids, Ethan, 28, HVAC testing in Kansas City, and Claire, 26, a nurse who still checks on her old man twice a week. We had our rhythm church on Sundays, barbecue at the Ridge, on holidays, morning coffee together when we could manage. It wasn't exciting, but it was solid. Or so I believed. Then came the spring of 2023. My older brother Dan was due for heart surgery out in Omaha. I'd planned to drive up, stay a week, help him through recovery. Maggie said she couldn't join because her women's ministry was hosting a fundraiser that week, and nothing strange about that. She'd been volunteering more since she retired from the elementary school. We'd grown used to spending time apart. She had her church ladies. I had my workshop and the VFW hall, where the same old stories got told over cheaper and cheaper beer. But that Tuesday night, right before the trip, something shifted. She was sitting at the kitchen counter, phone in her hand, smiling at a text. The glow from the screen caught her face, softer, almost nervous, like a teenager's. I asked who it was. Just teasing. She said, just the girls from the group planning next week. The phone flipped face down before I could glimpse a name. I remember thinking, maybe I've become invisible in my own house. Maybe this is what getting older does. It makes you a piece of furniture no one really looks at anymore. Still, I wanted to try. To surprise her, to remind us of who we were. So when Tien called at dawn, saying the doctors had postponed the surgery for a few days, I made a decision that would end my entire life. I didn't tell Maggie the trip was canceled. I packed the truck, kissed her goodbye, and drove off, like I was headed north. Only I circled back an hour later and parked behind my own workshop. The plan was simple. Pretend I was gone, then come home that evening with flowers, cook her dinner, maybe open that bottle of Malbec she loved. God help me. I thought it was romantic, one of those grand gestures you see in movies. The day dragged on slow. I welded a few joints, sanded down a walnut handrail, tried not to picture her alone in that quiet house. At noon, I grabbed a bowl of chili from Earl's Diner, the same place I've eaten since I was 20, and headed to the grocery store. Wine, fresh pasta, tomatoes, basil, a small bouquet from Loretta's Flower Shack. I even picked up a card that said, "Still us," after all these years. When the clock hit 3, I drove back toward home, heart pounding like a rookie on prom night. The late March sun spilled gold over the hills. The air smelled of wet soil and wood smoke. I parked a block away so she wouldn't hear the engine, then slipped through the back gate. Our backyard used to be my favorite place in the world, oak tree garden beds. She kept neat, a little wind chime by the porch. That afternoon it felt foreign, too quiet. I eased open the kitchen door. No smell of coffee, no music from her old radio, no sign of any one. Her purse wasn't on the counter where she always left it. The house had that hollow echo like a stage set after the play is over. "Maggie," I called. Nothing. Her car was gone. Her cell phone, too. She'd started carrying it everywhere lately, even into the bathroom, something she never used to do. I checked the calendar on the fridge. The day was blank except for one neat note in her handwriting from earlier in the week. "Wed, Women's Ministry Prep 2.0. I told myself she was running errands. Maybe with the church ladies. Maybe she'd pop back in surprised to see me and laugh about it later. But hours rolled by. 5 o'clock, 6, 7. Still no Maggie. I tried calling her straight to voicemail. I texted both kids. Neither had heard from her. Ethan said, "Maybe she's with the group, Dad. Don't overthink it." But something gnawed at me. That stillness wasn't normal. I sat in my old recliner as darkness filled the living room. The ticking clock sounded like hammer blows. By 9, worry had turned into a cold, crawling dread. That's when I decided to check her finance notebook, a small brown ledger she kept in the desk drawer. Maggie was meticulous about bills. She'd jot down every expense, every upcoming meeting or due date. I opened it, hoping to find a clue, an appointment, a phone number, anything. Page after page of careful writing. Electric, gas, tithe check to the church grocery runs. Then on the page for that very day, written in blue ink, just 3 words, "Widow empty." Carl B. The handwriting was hers, perfect and calm. "Widow meeting." Carl B. I stared at it until the letters blurred. Widow. My wife, the woman I'd kissed that morning, had an appointment, listed as a widow. I sat there for a long time, the refrigerator humming behind me, the wine and flowers still on the counter like a bad joke. My mind tried to make sense of it. Maybe she joined some grief support charity. Maybe MTGC meant meeting. Maybe Carl was the pastor. But deep down, something inside me knew. When a man has spent his whole life working with his hands shaping metal and wood, he learns to recognize pressure, the point where a beam will bend, and the exact second before it snaps. That night, sitting alone in that too-quiet house, I felt the same thing in my chest. A hairline crack had formed, and it was only a matter of time before everything I thought was solid gave way. When I found that note, "Widow CSMTG, Carl B." I told myself not to jump to conclusions. But by morning, sleep hadn't touched me, and curiosity had turned into a steady, mean pulse in my temples. I brewed coffee I didn't taste, and opened the drawer where Maggie kept the household bills. For 32 years we'd shared everything, checkbooks, passwords, even the old cigar box, where I stored spare keys. Her credit card statement lay under a stack of church flyers. I spread it out across the table like blueprints for a stranger's life. Charges in Branson, Kansas City, and one for an extended stay in Springfield, each landing on weekends she'd sworn she was serving with the ladies at church. There were restaurant tabs I didn't recognize, gift shop purchases, and a boutique I knew she'd never step into with me. At first I felt anger, hot and stupid. Then came the colder part, the craftsman in me, measuring the angles of deceit. I went to my office cabinet, the one where we kept mortgage papers, insurance, all the grown-up stuff. Buried inside was a folder labeled Home Equity Line of Credit, something I didn't remember signing. The document showed our house refinanced 6 months earlier. Co-owners Margaret Hale and Carl Benson. Carl Benson. That name glared from the page like a burn mark. I sat there staring at the signature that wasn't mine. The pen stroke was too smooth, too perfect. My hands have calluses. I don't make lines that clean. She had forged me, or convinced someone to do it. Either way, Maggie had tied our home, our years of sweat, to a man I'd never heard of. That's when the memories started fighting their way in, loud and stubborn, the early years when we'd built this place beam by beam. I can still feel the ache in my arms from hauling lumber after my shift at the mill, Maggie painting the siding, while the kids played with scrap wood in the yard. We used to joke that every nail carried a prayer. When the Ozarks flood hit in 2005 and wiped out my first workshop, she'd been the one who told me, "Start again, Rich. Hands like yours don't quit." We started again. We always did. That woman, the one who stayed up nights balancing checkbooks, who clipped coupons, who stood beside me at church singing off-key, how could she also be the woman signing my name next to Carl Benson? I needed answers. I called Pastor Ron from First Baptist around noon. "Ron, about Maggie's women's ministry. When's the next meeting?" A pause long enough to make my stomach drop. "Brother Hale, there hasn't been one this month. We canceled March meetings for the Lenten drive." "Why do you ask?" "No reason," I lied. "Just checking." My throat went dry. The lie tasted like rust. Next I phoned Ethan, tried to sound casual. "Son, your mom been up to anything new lately? Traveling for church or volunteering?" He laughed light and dismissive. "Dad, she's just bored. Don't start getting paranoid. You always think the worst." "That's so," I said quietly. "Yeah, she's fine. Maybe you should take her out more, instead of whatever this is." The line went dead with that little click that sounds final, no matter how many years of love sit behind it. I sat there listening to the silence that follows, being doubted by your own blood. By late afternoon, I decided I couldn't sit anymore. My gut told me to drive to see. Interstate 44 runs straight from Cedar Ridge to Springfield, and I'd driven it 1,000 times for supplies. That day, every mile felt like a confession waiting to happen. On the edge of town, just past mile marker 212, sits a motel called Red Cedar Lodge. Cheap rooms, discreet. Parking, the kind of place traveling salesmen use when they don't want receipts traced. Her car was there. Our silver Subaru. Parked neatly beside a dark CVC or CCCCCCV. I pulled into the diner across the road and waited, coffee cooling in my hands. 10 minutes. 20. Then the motel door opened. Maggie stepped out first, wearing a blue blouse. I'd never seen her hair fixed at softness. In her face I hadn't glimpsed in years. Beside her walked a tall man, with salt and pepper hair, maybe late 50s, trim suit jacket over jeans. He carried himself like someone used to giving instructions and being obeyed. They talked, close shoulders brushing, then climbed into that suite together. I didn't move, didn't shout, didn't storm over like the fool part of me wanted. I just watched the taillights merge with traffic heading east. When the shock thinned enough for me to breathe again, I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture of the license plate. Later that night, back home, I ran the plate number through a buddy of mine at the county clerk's office. His text came 15 minutes later. 2018 GMC Acadia, registered to Carl Benson, Springfield, Mo. I looked him up. Carl Benson, certified financial consultant. Divorced. No children listed. Lives in a gated community outside Springfield. And one more detail that made my stomach twist tighter than any vice I'd ever worked with. He's listed as temporary financial guardian for Ruth Henderson, Maggie's elderly aunt. The same aunt whose finances Maggie had been helping organize for months. I sat at the kitchen table until dawn, staring at that name glowing on the screen. The house felt colder than any workshop in midwinter. Carl Benson. Refinance, widow. Somewhere between those three words my marriage had disappeared. I grew up believing lawyers were for city people, the kind who argued over fences or patents, not for folks like me who built their own sheds and paid their bills on time. But that morning, as I sat staring at the refinance document, with my forged signature, I realized silence could cost me everything I'd ever worked for. So I drove 3 hours north to St. Louis to meet a woman named Martha Ruiz, a family attorney recommended by one of my suppliers. Her office smelled like paper and lemon polish. She listened without interrupting as I laid out the story, the fake signature, the hidden HELOC, the mysterious Carl Benson. When I was done, she folded her hands on the desk and said, "Calm but firm, Mr. Hale. You need to act immediately. If your wife or this man attempts to draw against that line of credit, they could drain your equity before you even file. I'll prepare a motion for a temporary restraining order. It freezes any disposal of marital assets until we sort this out. You'll also need to start documenting everything. Bank statements, texts, voicemails, screenshots, everything." The words hit like nails through fresh pine. Legal restraining assets, cold vocabulary for a warm home life gone to rot. "I'm not the suing type, Miss Ruiz," I said quietly. "I just want to protect what's mine." She gave me a look that was half sympathy, half steel. "Protecting what's yours isn't suing, Mr. Hale. It's self-respect." Driving back down I-44, I thought about that. Men like me raised in the Midwest, we fix our own leaks, pay cash, keep our heads down. We don't air our mess in public. But there's a line between pride and cowardice, and I'd spent my life teaching my kids that truth matters even when it's ugly. If I backed down now, what would that make me? That night, I called an old friend, Hank Doyle, retired sheriff's deputy, part-time investigator, and full-time bloodhound, when something smelled wrong. Hank and I had hunted deer together for 20 years. He was the kind of man who could find a missing coin in a gravel driveway. After I finished explaining, he gave a low whistle. "Hell, Rich, that's a mess wrapped in Sunday clothes. But yeah, I can look into this Carl fella. Might take a few days." It took him 2. On the 3rd morning, he knocked on my workshop door, holding a folder fat with printouts. "You might want to sit for this," he said. Turns out Maggie had been attending community events at a retirement village in Springfield under the name Margaret Hale Widow. Hank even found photos from the place's Facebook page. There she was, smiling beside Carl Benson name tags, gleaming like medals. Each image was a small death. My wife's eyes, those same eyes that used to look at me across the dinner table, now gazing at another man with that easy familiarity built on lease. "Carl's not hiding her," Hank said, sliding another sheet across. "He introduces her as his partner. Folks think they've been together for years. Word travels fast in Cedar Ridge, especially when someone's misery smells fresh. By the weekend, I couldn't fill my truck at the gas station without someone offering a slow, pitying nod. I started hearing my name in half-finished sentences. "Poor Richard. Can you believe? Claire, my daughter, showed up at the shop one evening with takeout and tears. Dad, don't listen to people. I'm with you. Whatever Mom's doing, it's wrong." Her voice shook, but there was fire in her. "I just need to understand why," I said. She shook her head. "Some things don't have a why, Ethan," though he kept his distance. When he finally called, his tone was clipped, defensive. "Dad, maybe you're blowing this out of proportion. You don't know the full story." "I know enough," I said. "Well, she's still Mom. I'm still Dad," I reminded him. "Remember that when the truth hits daylight." He sighed, the sound of a boy caught between 2 collapsing worlds. Meanwhile, Martha filed the paperwork. The restraining order went through quietly. No drama yet, just tension, thick enough to taste. She advised patience. Gather proof before confrontation, she said. Emotion is the enemy of leverage. Proof came sooner than expected. Hank returned the next week, his eyes grim, but almost impressed. You're not gonna believe this, Rich. He handed me a color printout. It was a flyer from a Springfield Community Center, Spousal Loss Support Brunch, sponsored by Springfield Senior Network keynote speaker, Mrs. Margaret Hale, sharing her journey through grief and renewal. My throat closed as I read it. Hank's finger tapped the bottom photo. They filmed it, he said. Here. He played a short clip on his phone. There she was, Maggie standing behind a podium, with flowers and soft piano music in the background. She spoke into the mic voice, gentle, composed, almost saintly. Losing Richard taught me to begin again, she said. To honor the past, but not live in it. Behind her, a projector displayed a slide with a black and white portrait of me, cropped from our 30-year anniversary photo. Underneath it read, Richard Hale, 1969 to 2321. I didn't move, didn't blink. The room around me blurred until only her voice remained warm, false practiced. Hank lowered the phone. She killed you, buddy. On paper, at least. I exhaled slowly, the way you do before a long cut through stubborn steel. Then I guess it's time, I said. Time for what Hank asked. For me to prove I'm still alive. You can tell a lot about a man by the way he treats raw material. Back when I was 19, I apprenticed under Roy Mathers, the best staircase builder in the Ozarks. He worked out of a creaky old barn that smelled of linseed oil and burnt steel. And he always said the same thing before striking the first arc. Steel's like people, Richie. You gotta catch it at the right heat. Too cold, it cracks. Too hot, it loses its strength. That lesson followed me through every phase of my life. I learned to listen to the hiss of the welder, the hum of the saw, the creak of the wood as it bent under pressure. When the 2008 flood tore through Cedar Ridge and took my workshop downstream, I thought I was finished. But the town showed up, neighbors, church friends, even old rivals from the mill. They lifted beams, hammered nails, brought coffee in thermoses at dawn. We rebuilt that shop from the mud up, and I swore I'd never forget what community meant. And Maggie back then was right there beside me. She was 38, sharp as a tack, with a laugh that carried across the yard. She kept the books, baked pies for the volunteers, held my hand when I wanted to quit. That woman could stretch $1 farther than any banker. She used to say, we're not rich, but we're real. Somewhere along the way, though, real stopped being enough. It started after her mother passed in 2019. Maggie changed slowly, at first like a light dimming over time. She stopped humming while she cooked. She stayed up later, scrolling on her phone, eyes hollow and tired. I figured it was grief. We'd been through loss before, and I thought time would heal her the way it always had. But this time she didn't come back to me. Maybe that was when she started becoming the widow I met years later, the one who could stand on a stage and tell strangers I'd died. That thought sat heavy in my chest as I drove toward Springfield's Civic Conference Center, a week after Hank showed me the video. Hank had traced Maggie's calendar through her email, another support event, same group. I parked across the street, my pulse steady like it always is, before I start a difficult weld. Martha's voice echoed in my head. Stay calm, Richard. Anger destroys evidence. Collect, don't confront. Inside the lobby smelled of hotel carpet and perfume. Posters on easels read, Widows of the Heart, moving forward through faith. I stood in the hallway, half hidden behind a column, listening. Her voice came through the cracked door, steady and gentle, the same tone she used to soothe the kids after nightmares. Grief isn't the end, she said. When my husband Richard passed from a sudden stroke 2 years ago, I thought I'd lost my purpose. But I realized God gives us new beginnings if we have the courage to take them. A polite wave of applause followed. I gripped the edge of the wall so hard my knuckles went white. Stroke. That's how she'd killed me this time. A neat, respectable death. No mess, no questions. Every muscle in me wanted to push through those doors, point at her, and shout, "He's not dead, you're lying." But then I saw Carl Benson sitting in the front row, smiling with proud admiration. A few people turned toward him, as if he were the hero who'd lifted her from tragedy. That's when Martha's warning came back, like a hammer to the chest. Don't make it about fury. Make it about facts. So I stayed. I recorded the entire speech on my phone. Her words, the fake tears, the audience's sighs. Every detail was evidence now. After the talk, I slipped into the banquet area where servers were clearing coffee cups. The table where she'd been sitting still had her name badge, Margaret Hale, guest speaker, and beside it, a printed receipt for event sponsorship, signed by Carl Benson Springfield Financial Group. I snapped photos, pocketed the badge, and backed away before anyone noticed. Through the glass doors, I watched them together again, Maggie and Carl, walking toward a projection screen near the lobby, where volunteers were setting up a slideshow for donors. He was laughing, holding a small remote. Then by accident or arrogance, he tapped the wrong button. The projector switched from the event slides to his phone screen, still connected by AirPlay. A text thread appeared big enough for anyone nearby to read. At the top, Carl Benson. Messages. The latest message glowed bright against the blue background. Sent just a minute before from an unknown number labeled Insurance Admin Policy Update. Confirmed, new beneficiary approved, effective immediately. For a second, Carl froze, realizing what he'd done. He fumbled for the remote, killing the feed, but not before I snapped a photo. The entire moment burned into my camera and my memory. New beneficiary. My heart sank with the weight of the obvious. She hadn't just buried me. In words, she'd replaced me in paperwork. That was the night I stopped being a husband, trying to save a marriage, and became a man, determined to save the truth. I waited for them in the parking lot, leaning against my truck, arms folded tight enough to keep the rage from spilling out. The afternoon sun bounced off the chrome hoods, throwing sharp flashes into my eyes. When Maggie and Carl stepped out of the building laughing about something only the two of them found funny, I straightened up. Carl saw me first. His smile faltered, confusion passing across his face before recognition settled in. Maggie froze, color draining fast. "Mr. Benson," I said evenly, "mind if we have a word man to man?" Maggie started to speak, but I lifted a hand. "Not you, Margaret. You've said enough for a whole new life, apparently." Carl hesitated, then nodded toward the far end of the lot. We walked until the noise of traffic drowned out everything else. He kept his hands visible, polite but guarded. "I assume you're Richard," he said quietly. "The husband who passed." "Alive and breathing," I replied. "Sorry to disappoint." He swallowed hard. "I had no idea." "I swear it. She told everyone you died of a stroke 2 years ago. There was even," he stopped, shaking his head, "a memorial picture. I wouldn't have gotten involved if I'd known." For a moment, I studied him. The man wasn't a villain, just another fool caught in the undertow of her story. His voice carried genuine remorse. "You believed her," I said. "Because why wouldn't you? She's convincing. Been practicing for years." He rubbed the back of his neck. "She talked about you with such affection, you know. Said you'd been a good man, that she missed you every day. I thought I was helping her heal." "Then she's quite the actress," I murmured. He nodded once, looking me square in the eye. "Whatever this is, Mr. Hale, I'm done with it. You have my word. I'll end it. And I'll tell her she needs to make things right." Appreciate that. I said, my voice came out flatter than I meant. Just know there's more at stake than a broken heart. There's money, property, my name. He gave a slow nod. Understood. We parted without shaking hands. I watched him walk away, realizing the strangest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was that in Maggie's new world, I'd been erased so completely that strangers now mourned me. I drove home in silence, the hum of the tires loud in the empty cab. When I stepped through the front door, Ethan was waiting, arms crossed. Claire told me what you're doing, he said. Hiring lawyers, following Mom. You've got to stop this, Dad. It's humiliating. Humiliating, I asked. You think I'm the one embarrassing the family? She's been lonely for years, he shot back. You were always at that damn shop. Every Christmas, every weekend, you and your work. You don't get to act shocked now that she found someone who listened. The words hit hard because they weren't all wrong. I took a slow breath. You're right, son. I wasn't perfect. I missed birthdays, I stayed late too many nights. But there's a line between lonely and lying. And what she did, faking my death, stealing my signature, that's not loneliness. That's fraud. Ethan's jaw tightened. Maybe you're both guilty of different things. Maybe, I said. But truth comes first. Then we can talk about guilt. He shook his head, eyes full of the kind of anger only a son can have, the one that mixes love and disappointment until it burns. Then he walked out the door, slamming like a closing chapter. That night I sat with Martha on a video call. Her glasses caught the light from her monitor. We filed the motion, she said. Joint accounts frozen until further notice. I've also requested a subpoena for her phone records and email. Should confirm any financial collusion with Benson. You'll need to stay patient, Mr. Hale. The system's slow. Patience isn't the problem, I said. It's sleeping in a house built on lies. She gave me a sympathetic half smile. Truth takes time to season. Keep your evidence clean. A week passed. The town's whispers grew louder. Claire visited often, trying to keep peace, while Ethan stayed silent. Every nail I hammered in the shop sounded like punctuation on something ending. Then Hank showed up again, holding a single sheet of paper. His eyes were serious, his voice low. You better sit, Rich. It was a beneficiary change form from my old life insurance policy filed 6 months earlier. Someone had replaced my original paperwork with a copy complete with a certified death certificate stating I died on August 14th, 2021. The new beneficiary line read, Margaret Hale, surviving spouse. My name, my signature, my death. Where the hell did she get a death certificate, I asked. Hank's jaw clenched. Someone submitted it through an online portal. Faked the notary stamp, even the hospital code. But get this, the upload originated from an IP address linked to Carl Benson's office network. The room seemed to tilt slightly, as if the foundation of my world had shifted another inch. She didn't just pretend to lose me, I said. She buried me in paperwork. Hank nodded slowly. Yeah, buddy. And now if we don't act fast, she might cash you out for real. I looked down at the paper. The cold official lines declaring me dead. My fingers trembled not from fear, but from the realization that I wasn't fighting a heartbreak anymore. I was fighting an erasure. The courthouse in Cedar County smelled like old fur and lemon wax, same as it had 20 years ago, when I filed the business license for my shop. Back then, it had been the smell of beginnings. Now it was the scent of something dying slow. I sat at the petitioner's table beside Martha Ruiz, dressed in my only dark suit, the one I had worn to funerals and graduations. Across the aisle sat Maggie, poised, neatly dressed, in gray eyes fixed on the tabletop. And next to her, a local attorney I didn't recognize. Behind them, a few curious faces from town, pretending to read their phones. Cedar Ridge was dull. Secrets never stayed buried long. The bailiff called the session to order. The judge, a silver-haired man named Harlan Clay, known for being both fair and unsparing, adjusted his glasses. Case of Hale versus Hale preliminary hearing on marital asset protection and alleged financial misrepresentation, he read. Counsel, you may proceed. Martha rose crisp and calm. Her voice filled the courtroom with creased authority. Your Honor, my client, Mr. Richard Hale, discovered that Mrs. Margaret Hale fraudulently executed a home equity line of credit, removing nearly $75,000 in shared property value without his consent. Furthermore, evidence suggests she falsely declared him deceased in order to secure financial benefits, including life insurance documentation, and represented herself as a widow in another jurisdiction. The opposing attorney shifted uncomfortably. Maggie's head remained bowed. Martha continued her tone-cutting, but controlled beyond the marital deception. This pattern of conduct endangered the financial stability of an elderly relative for whom Mrs. Hale was appointed guardian. Funds from that same HELOC appear to have been transferred into an account tied to that elderly woman's trust. We believe this constitutes not only fraud, but potential financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult under Missouri statute, Counter 57-145. The judge tapped his pen, eyes narrowing. Do you have preliminary documentation to support this claim? Yes, Your Honor, Martha said, sliding a binder forward. Bank records, screenshots, and corroborating statements from a private investigator. The opposing attorney stood trying to inject calm. Mrs. Hale disputes these allegations. She acted under mistaken advice and emotional distress, not intent to defraud. There was no concealment, merely confusion after years of marital separation. Separation. Martha's voice sharpened. Mr. Hale never consented to any separation, nor filed for one. He was living under the same roof, very much alive, when she represented herself as his widow. Judge Clay leaned back, exhaling slowly. Well, that's a first for me. He removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. I'm granting temporary relief. Effective immediately. Mrs. Hale, you are prohibited from selling, transferring, or encumbering any marital assets. You are further ordered to return 50% of the funds withdrawn from the HELOC, pending further review. Both parties will surrender all personal electronic devices to court-appointed forensic technicians for data preservation. Non-compliance will result in contempt sanctions. The gavel came down like a hammer on iron. The hearing was adjourned. Papers shuffled, chairs scraped, and people drifted toward the hallway whispering. I stayed seated a moment longer, staring at the empty spot on the table between us. So many years of shared life, distilled into a case number. When I finally stepped into the corridor, Maggie was waiting near the water fountain. For the first time in months, she looked small, not calculating, not defiant, just tired. Richard, she said softly. Please. I didn't want it to get this far. I stopped a few feet away. Then why did you bury me alive, Maggie? Her lips trembled. I couldn't face it here. Cedar Ridge would have eaten me alive if I'd filed for divorce. Everyone sees us as the perfect couple. Church committee, community fairs, the shop, the house. I just needed to breathe. Springfield was supposed to be space, not sin. I let her words hang there. Somewhere under all that self-pity, I could still hear the woman who used to sit beside me on the porch swing and dream about forever. You could have asked for space, I said quietly. You didn't need to carve a gravestone for me to get it. She closed her eyes, tears breaking loose. I know. But once I said it, I couldn't undo it. It became real, and people believed me. Even Carl. And what about the banks, the insurance forms? Was that grief too? No answer. just silence, thick as dust. I turned away, because pity was a dangerous feeling. It made you forget the knife still in your back. Martha joined me near the exit, phone pressed to her ear, expression darkening by the second. "We've got another problem," she said as soon as she hung up. "What now?" "The insurance company just confirmed 6 months ago. Someone filed a bereavement assistance claim under your old life insurance policy. Small payout, only $5,000, but enough to activate the file. It was signed and approved." My chest tightened. "Signed by who?" She looked up, her voice flat. "By Margaret Hale, widow of Richard Hale." For a moment, everything went quiet, the kind of silence you hear right before lightning hits. That's when I realized this wasn't just betrayal. It was premeditated resurrection fraud. She'd built a paper grave for me, and then started cashing the flowers laid on top. And somewhere deep down, a fire I hadn't felt since that flood in '08 began to burn again. This time, though, I wasn't rebuilding a workshop. I was rebuilding myself. I hadn't seen Aunt Ruth in over a year. At 77, she was still sharp as a tack, her voice carrying that gentle twang of a Missouri farm woman who'd seen everything and learned not to panic about much. When she called asking to talk face to face, I drove the hour to Springfield without a word to anyone, not even Martha. Something in her voice told me it wasn't just a family courtesy. She met me on the porch of her retirement cottage, wrapped in a knitted shawl, a cup of mint tea in her hands. The place smelled like lavender and lemon polish. A cat ears, I guessed, slept on the windowsill. "Richard," she said, gesturing me inside, "I reckon you've been through hell lately." "Hell with a mortgage," I replied quietly. She gave a half smile, but didn't argue. "I need to clear something before the Lord calls me home. You know that man, Carl Benson?" I nodded, jaw tight. "Oh, I know him." "Well," she said, sitting down slow, "he's not the devil everyone's making him out to be. A fool maybe, but not wicked. The truth is, it wasn't Carl who came up with those investment transfers. It was Maggie." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Ruth took a breath, steadying her trembling hands. "After I had that small stroke last year, Maggie came by often, brought casseroles, helped with my bills. She said Carl could consolidate my portfolio, make it easier for me to manage. Claimed the fees would be lower. She said it was for my good. I trusted her. She's family." She looked me straight in the eye. What I didn't know was that she convinced Carl to open a temporary bridge loan using my assets as collateral, said it was a short-term liquidity arrangement for my care. But she redirected part of that money into an account I never saw. Carl signed off thinking it was all legitimate trustee work, and I didn't find out until the auditors called. Her words hit me harder than I expected. Maggie hadn't just faked my death. She'd used the trust of an old woman as a lever for her double life. "Did Carl know where the money went?" I asked quietly. Ruth shook her head. "He said he thought it was for my medical bills." Poor man was red in the face when the examiner called him out. "I think she played him, same as she played you." For a long moment, I just sat there staring at my calloused hands. I could almost feel the old anger rising again, that raw urge to burn everything she'd touched. But the older you get, the more you understand revenge is like welding without a mask. It blinds you before it destroys the metal. When I finally spoke, my voice came steady. "Ruth, I'll make sure this gets to the court and to the financial board. No more backroom lies." "That's all I wanted to hear," she said softly. "Don't let this rot your soul, Richard. She's already paid enough rent in there." Driving back along Highway 65, I rolled the windows down and let the wind wash through the cab. For the first time in months, I didn't feel vengeance. I felt purpose. That evening, Claire showed up at my house. She'd been quiet through everything, neutral, diplomatic. But now she stood in the doorway, eyes wet. "Dad," she said, "I need to tell you something." She sat at the kitchen table, where the light fell soft and golden, like the old days when she'd do her homework there. I knew something was off with Mom. Last year, she'd leave the house dressed up, saying she was going to Bible study, but she'd wear perfume I'd never smelled before. Once I saw her suitcase in the trunk and asked where she was going. She said it was for a church retreat. I knew she was lying, but I didn't want to blow everything up. Her voice cracked. I thought maybe she was just lost and that it would pass. I didn't want you to hate her. I reached across the table, resting my Wolf Holland over hers. "Claire, telling the truth isn't hate. It's courage. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop pretending something's fine when it's rotten." She nodded, wiping tears. "I wish Ethan could see it like that." "He will," I said. "In time." For a moment, we just sat there, father and daughter, two people trying to make sense of the wreckage of love. As the night settled, my phone buzzed. It was Hank. "Rich," he said, voice tight but triumphant. "You're not gonna believe this. Carl Benson just filed a formal withdrawal from Aunt Ruth's financial case and submitted a sworn statement to the regulatory board." I straightened. "What kind of statement?" "He says he was deceived by Maggie Hale. Claims she manipulated him into approving those transfers and even into signing off on your fake death paperwork. Says she forged half the documentation and used his credentials to validate the rest." I leaned against the counter, staring out the window into the dark. So I said quietly, "The man who helped bury me just started digging the truth out." Hank exhaled. "Looks that way, buddy. And now the whole damn thing's about to blow wide open." I chose the place carefully. Not a lawyer's office, not the courthouse, my shop. If there was one place left in the world where I still felt whole, it was there, among the smell of linseed oil and steel dust, the hum of machines that had listened to my secrets for 30 years. I turned off most of the lights, except for the big overhead lamp above the workbench. The cone of light fell across the half-built spiral staircase I'd been crafting for weeks, oak and iron, the kind of project that reminded me why hands exist in the first place. When Maggie walked in, the sound of her heels on the concrete echoed like distant nails being driven into wood. She stopped a few paces away, arms folded tight, glancing around as if she were entering a memory she no longer recognized. "This is where it all started," I said quietly. "Our first down payment, our long nights building railings till dawn. You used to bring me coffee in that old blue mug." She didn't answer. Her face was pale, her eyes tired, mascara smudged at the corners. "I asked you here," I continued, "because I'm done hiding behind lawyers and paperwork. I want to hear the truth, not the version you give judges or insurance companies. Just you. Just me." She exhaled shakily. "You already know the truth, Richard." "No," I said, voice rising a notch. "I know facts. I want to know why. Why fake my death? Why rob Ruth's trust? Why turn your own husband into a ghost?" Her lips trembled. "Because I was drowning, and nobody noticed. That stopped me." She took a step closer, voice cracking. "When Mom died, something broke in me. People at church started treating me like a relic. Maggie, you've had such a good life, Maggie. You're so lucky to have a steady husband." Every word felt like a lid closing on me. I didn't want to be lucky. I wanted to be alive. "So you killed me to feel alive?" I asked, my tone cold but steady. Tears filled her eyes. "It wasn't about killing you. It was about starting over. In Springfield, when I said I was a widow, people listened. They cared. I wasn't the principal's wife or the welder's wife. I was Meaty." I looked at her, really looked past the lies, the schemes, the wreckage. She wasn't evil. She was broken. And she'd built her survival out of other people's bones. You think you're the only one who felt invisible? I asked softly. You think standing here 12 hours a day, covered in sawdust, watching your kids grow up, while you're sanding banisters, I didn't get lonely too, but I never buried you in my imagination, Maggie. I never walked around pretending you were dead just so I could breathe easier. She shook her head, sobbing quietly. I know. You've always been better than me. That's not what I'm saying, I replied. But there's a difference between being lonely and being cruel. The sawdust hung in the light, like golden smoke as I walked closer. So here's what's going to happen. You go to court. You sign the divorce clean. You return every cent from that HELOC. And you issue a public retraction. Springfield, Cedar Ridge, everywhere. You admit what you did. Or I hand everything to the prosecutor, every fake form, every falsified death certificate. You won't just lose face. You'll lose your freedom. Her breath, hitched chest rising and falling fast. You'd really do that to me, she whispered. I'm not doing it to you, I said. You already did it to yourself. For a moment, all we heard was the faint whine of a cooling motor. She turned toward the half-built staircase, running her hand over the smooth curve of the wood. You still build beautiful things, she murmured. I build them from damage, I said. That's what wood and steel have in common. They both need pressure to find their strength. She nodded, wiping her face. Then, after a long silence, she said something that made the air go still. There's something you don't know, Richard. I frowned. What now? She hesitated, eyes darting toward the floor. That home equity loan, when I filed it, the bank asked for a cosigner. I told Ethan it was for refinancing to help cover your shop's expansion. He signed the guarantee papers. He thought he was helping me, helping us. For a heartbeat, I didn't move. My son, my blood, unwittingly tied to her deception. The saw's motor clicked once, like an echo of thunder. Maggie, I said, voice low and dangerous. Please tell me you're lying. She met my eyes, tears spilling again. I wish I were. The world seemed to shrink to the space between us, the woman who buried me in fiction, and the son who might drown with her in reality. I took a slow breath, forcing my voice steady. Then this stops now. All of it. Before Ethan pays for your sins. She nodded weakly, and for the first time in years, she looked genuinely afraid, not of losing face, but of what her choices had cost the people she once loved. When the subpoena for Ethan's signature came through, I didn't sleep for 2 nights. Not because of anger, because of shame. I'd spent my whole life teaching that boy how to tighten a bolt, how to stand straight, how to shake a hand like a man, but I'd never taught him the most important thing, how to recognize deceit when it wears a family face. He came by the shop the next morning, eyes red, voice low. Dad, he said, I swear I didn't know. She told me the loan was to keep your business afloat during supply shortages. I didn't even read half of it. I just wanted to help. I laid a hand on his shoulder. I know you did, son. This isn't on you. It's on me for not teaching you that trust needs verification, even inside a family. He tried to apologize again, but I stopped him. No more guilt. We learn and move on. That's what Hales do. 2 weeks later, we sat in a beige conference room at the Cedar County Mediation Center, me, Maggie, Martha, her attorney, and a neutral mediator who looked like she'd seen every kind of heartbreak the Midwest could produce. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The air smelled faintly of old coffee and paperwork. Martha spoke first, calm and surgical. Mrs. Hale has agreed to liquidate the Table Rock Lake property. It was purchased during the marriage, titled solely under her name, but with joint marital funds. Proceeds will repay the outstanding HELOC balance and any misappropriated accounts. Maggie's lawyer nodded stiffly. The court, Martha continued, will accept Mrs. Hale's written correction and retraction to the insurance company, acknowledging that Mr. Hale is alive and that prior claims were made under mistaken representation. The retirement community in Springfield will also receive a letter of correction and apology, brief, factual, no dramatics. The mediator looked to Maggie. "Do you agree to these terms?" Maggie nodded, voice barely audible. "Yes." Martha closed the folder. Additionally, the county prosecutor has decided to pursue this as a civil infraction, not a felony, based on Mrs. Hale's cooperation and restitution. Mr. Benson is cleared of charges. His voluntary testimony and withdrawal showed good faith. That part stung a little, but I understood. Carl had done the right thing when it counted, and sometimes that had to be enough. The mediator folded her hands. "Now, before we conclude, both parties have the right to state any final terms of personal conduct moving forward." I looked at Maggie across the table. The woman who'd been my partner for 32 years, the mother of my children, the architect of my disappearance. "Here's mine," I said quietly. "We keep the divorce clean. No public bashing. No poison around the grandkids. You'll always be their grandmother, and I'll respect that. But I won't pretend this didn't happen. I'll tell my story to my friends, to the folks my age, who need to know it's possible to survive something like this. That's my way of standing back up." She wiped at her cheek, not quite creamwise, but closely. "I understand. You don't have to like it," I said. "Just respect it." The mediator gave a small approving nod. "That's one of the healthier divorce boundaries I've heard in a long time." We signed the papers. I didn't feel triumph. Just a deep, tired peace, the kind that comes after a storm when the air finally goes still. Outside, Ethan and Claire waited in the hallway. Ethan gave his mother a quiet hug. Claire just nodded politely. No shouting, no dramatics, just the quiet dignity of a family trying to keep what was left intact. That night I sat on my porch with a beer and the sound of crickets. The shop lights glowed in the distance. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a ghost. Then came the soft knock on my door. It was Maggie. She didn't step inside, just handed me a thick sealed envelope. Her eyes were steady, almost calm. "It's not an excuse," she said. "It's the truth. The last one I have left." I stared at the envelope. "What is it?" "A letter," she said. "Everything I never said. You can read it or burn it. Either way, it's yours." She turned and walked down the porch steps, her silhouette fading into the Missouri dusk. I looked down at the envelope in my hand, my name written in her looping cursive, "Richard, the final truth." The crickets went silent for a moment, as if the night itself were waiting for me to open it. I never did open Maggie's letter that night. It sat on my workbench for a weak yellow envelope, catching the light from the shop window each morning, daring me to face it. When I finally slid it open, the paper smelled faintly of her lavender lotion, like the echo of a life we'd already buried. Her handwriting was neat, deliberate. "Richard." I started lying to protect myself from embarrassment. The first lie was tiny, telling a friend we were taking a break, so I wouldn't have to admit how cold our house had become. Then came bigger ones, each easier than the last, until the lie became a whole new life. I told myself you were strong enough to live without me, but that wasn't true. You deserved honesty. I took that from you. I'm sorry for killing you in imagination just to feel alive. Whatever you do next, I hope it's something real. Because you always were. I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully and tucked it behind an old photograph of our wedding, because forgiveness, I've learned, doesn't erase history. It just stops it from controlling the rest of your story. That fall, I reopened the shop not just for business, but for something bigger. Every Saturday, a handful of older men and women from Cedar Ridge gathered under the smell of oil and sawdust, learning how to shape wood and weld steel. I called it Still Standing. Some came because they'd lost jobs, others because they'd lost purpose. We made simple things: porch railings, birdhouses, lamp frames. I taught them how to read the heat, how to trust their hands again. And somewhere in those quiet mornings, I started healing too. The town began to see me not as the man whose wife faked his death, but as the guy who turned survival into craft. When the Cedar Ridge Library commissioned a new interior staircase case, I designed it myself, a sweeping spiral of walnut and black steel smooth as a river bend. On the final day of installation, I bolted a small brass plate to the base of the first step. It read, "Handcrafted by Richard Hale." Still standing. No bitterness, no ghost stories, just truth solid and visible. At Thanksgiving, Ethan and Claire came over. I grilled outside despite the cold, and we laughed for the first time in months. Over pie, I told them about a new idea. "I'm thinking we start a small fund," I said, "for people our age or older who've been laid off and want to learn a trade. We'll name it after my old mentor, Roy Mathers. He taught me everything I know about shaping hard things without breaking them." Ethan grinned. "A scholarship for second chances is." "Exactly," I said. "Roy believed even old metal can be forged new." Claire raised her glass. "To second chances then." And for once the word family didn't sound broken. Sometimes on quiet evenings, I still hear the echo of Maggie's voice in the shop, the ghost of what used to be, but it no longer hurts. Maybe because I finally understand what she couldn't. Truth isn't a hammer that shatters the past. It's a headlight that lets you drive through the dark toward what's next. I live with my name back in daylight now, on contracts, invoices, and the staircase at the library. My revenge turned out to be pretty simple. I kept living. Late one Friday, as I cleaned the workbench, the old answering machine blinked red. I pressed play. A man's voice crackled through the static. "Mr. Hale, this is James from Union Bank in Kansas City. We need to verify an application made under your name earlier today. Could you please call us back?" I froze, rag still in my hand. The machine clicked off, leaving the hum of the shop hanging in the air. I looked at the plaque on the wall still standing, and let out a slow breath. Because whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain. This time Richard Hale was very much alive and ready. If you've stayed with me till now, thank you. I'm not here asking for pity. I've had enough of that. What I want is for folks my age to remember one thing: the truth doesn't just hurt, it heals. You can lose your house, your money, even your good name, but if you still have your honesty, you can rebuild all of it. That's what I did. That's how I lived after being pronounced dead. So if this story hit something inside you, leave a comment. Tell me where you're listening from, and maybe share the moment you decided to start over too. Because this old man from Missouri is still standing, and so can you.